It gives me great trepidation or great honor to introduce our guest speaker. Some of y'all know him, some of y'all don't, but it's Buzz Tatham, and we're going to find out what he has to say about Brasstown, the Native Americans that live in Brasstown Valley.
If this works out tonight, I appreciate it. If it doesn't, it's Jerry Taylor that talked me into this. And that means you're going to look for somebody in November, because you probably won't have me back. Years ago, I had a professor in archaeology, Mr. Reed may or may not be familiar with, at Piedmont College, named Max White. Dr. White, he was probably one of the most deadpan somebody I mean, he could be funny and not even try. One serious thing that he did say was that if you ever meet an archaeologist that would say, this is the way it was, then run as fast as you know how. Because nobody knows this is the way it was. If they say, however, this is what we have discovered, then pay attention. Because indeed, it may broaden your horizon a little bit. Native Americans of Brasstown Valley, the people that I've talked to just tonight, people I've talked to in preparation for this program, they could add a wealth of information that I've not even touched on in preparing this thing. When I saw this flyer, I thought, boy, howdy, I don't want to miss that program. It looks pretty doggone good. The flyer looks better than the program. We could stare at this for 20 minutes and I'd sit down and that'd be the end of it. Yeah, Mary Ann did a heck of a job on that. It kind of makes the program underwhelming. My purpose here tonight, contrary to what some of you may believe, I'm not here to spread hate, discontent, or aggravation or agitation. And I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I am here to try to get you to think. Just throw some things out there, but we all have to agree on certain things. First of all, there is a concept called irreducible historic events. They're universally accepted without interpretation. You know it, I know it, all God's children know it. And if we agree to that, we're going to start off great. The one thing that we have to agree on is that there has been a human presence in Brasstown Valley over multiple centuries. A human presence. Humans have witnessed centuries of winters decorating double knobs. Probably saw it just like that. The tall sentinels guarding the valley have witnessed untold stories of people calling Brasstown Valley home. Just exactly what you see right there spans a millennium. The ridges have changed little as years passed, except Swanson Mountain. I'm sure the Native Americans that lived in Brasstown Valley didn't look up to mercury vapor lamps and houses all over the top of Swanson Mountain. But other than that, pretty much everything in Brasstown Valley has been exactly as it's always been. I'm going to try to get that mouse out of the way as fast as he does. Now, when you're talking about early Native Americans, there are 4 stages I'll concentrate on, 6 in addition to this. The Paleo-Indian stage went from 13,000 to 8,000 BC, and you'll notice, for those of you who may not know, that as you're in BC, you progress downward to 0. In AD, you progress upward to the present day. The Archaic stage went from 8,000 to 1,000 BC. The Woodland stage from 1,000 BC to 1,000 AD. Now, the Mississippian stage, some archaeologists fold that into the Woodland stage, and they don't make a separation. I'm going to make a separation. And then the two stages that are beyond that, that Mr. Reed will cover next time, and he and I have not talked, so I have no clue. He's probably going to laugh at a lot of what I do, because he knows what he's talking about, I don't. But in the Mississippian stage after that, you have the contact or colonial stage till about 1820. And after that, the American stage. But I'm not going to concentrate on anything other than what you see here. In the Paleo-Indian stage, Native Americans would follow after animals. That was their food source. And they would move wherever the animals moved. Usually the animals would be salt licks, tar pits, bodies of water, and that's where the kills would be made. And that's where the Native Americans would harvest their kill. And once the game petered out there, they would move on. They were nomadic. In the archaic stage, they got to be a little more settled, if you will. Now, the huts would not be permanent, but they would be sheltered from the elements. And in the archaic stage, we start to see more and more of the artifacts that I've uncovered, you've uncovered, a lot of folks in our valley have uncovered. In the Mississippian stage, you start to see the villages. You start to see villages surrounded by palisades, and those villages would be located next to water and flat land to where agriculture would take place, because they started to be agrarian. And toward the latter part of the Mississippian stage, that's where you started to see corn come about. Now, keep in mind, the people that we're talking about have commonalities just like we do. The human physiology is identical to ours. They had birth, they had life, they had death. The human psychology, the same. They had levels of thought, range of emotion. They could cry, they could laugh, they could be sad, they could be happy. So we all have to agree on that part as well, because a lot of times we tend to compartmentalize pre-contact civilization as being some sort of alien existence. And they were far from that. They were human just as much as any of us in this room. Now, how would these Native Americans pre-contact communicate? Well, oral tradition, oral lore. They would pass from one generation to the next. That's where ideas, culture, and art communicated. They were transmitted orally from one generation. They didn't write them down. They had no way of writing. They didn't have a written language, as far as we know. I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to be 95% sure that they didn't have a written language. But one thing about oral communication, it is subjective, and it is subject to, I should say, to perceptive corruption. If you tell somebody something, they don't necessarily get it wrong, but they may not hear exactly what was said the way it was said. And that corruption, once it's introduced into the oral tradition, passes generationally, and it continues to increase with corruption. So we may not know a lot of those traditions that were passed down by Native Americans as it got into contact generations, the Cherokee, because the corruption was so bad. I'm sure you'll hear a lot about it next week, but even in the Cherokee language, say, let's go to the Smokies for a minute. There's a mountain there called Boat, B-O-T-E mountain. The reason it's called Boat Mountain is because the Cherokee had no V sound in their language for vote mountain. So that corruption maintained itself even to the maps of today as Boat Mountain. Let me give you an example of corruption that occurs even today. You're going to like this, I know I do. Tatham. More likely than not, people look at T-A-T-H-A-M and pronounce it, oh look, there's Buzz Tatum. Sorry, it's not Tatum. Even though way back in the 1700s, my ancestors had their name written down on records as T-A-T-E-M, because a corruption, but it is pronounced Tatham. Now if I put up L-A-T-H-A-M, oh yeah, that's Latham. What's the difference? There's just a T. There is no difference. I've never heard anybody say, oh look, there's old Sam Latham. No, they never messed that one up. They always mess up Tatham, but that's a corruption. All of my families had to live with that. And when I die, unless I'm around to correct it, it's going to be Tatham, I guarantee it. Now, on this slide here, this is a representation of an early Native American village located at Anderson Bridge. That site is documented. And I want to explain how the sites are listed in the archaeological annals of Georgia. 9TO1. Anytime you see a listing of archaeological sites, you see a 9 in front of it, that indicates the state of Georgia. It's not that we're number 9 as far as our foundation, but alphabetically, we're number 9 in the pecking order. So that's why the 9 is there. And all the counties of Georgia have a 2-letter designator. Towns County has TO. How convenient. Then the 1 afterwards indicates the first site to be cataloged. So the first site at Anderson Bridge, in all probability, was a Mississippian village that was located right when you cross the river, probably located on the Bell Creek side that's now under the waters of Lake Chatou. We also have Peachtree right across the state line, still on the banks of the Hiwassee. And Peachtree Mound was excavated 1933-34. Now, the mound at Peachtree was excavated after the mound at Nacoochee, and I'll say something about that. The mound at Nacoochee was excavated by the Hay Foundation first in 1915. They weren't too delicate, as they weren't too delicate at Peachtree Mound. And a lot of the artifacts there, even though they tried to preserve them in context, which I'll talk about later, they probably didn't because of their methodology. Spikebuck Mound, right across the river in Hayesville, North Carolina. Another Mississippian mound. Maybe. It could be earlier. Spikebuck Mound from the air. And this is the ball field. This is where Spikebuck Mound would be located on the Hiwassee River. I've got another picture here, a little closer. If you've been to Spikebuck Mound, this is the interpretive signs, the mound itself, and the river in the background, the Hiwassee River. And all of that area around that was cultivated, and it was also an Indian village. Nacoochee Mound, that is a reconstruction. Nacoochee Mound was actually excavated completely in 1915. And a lot of people have the idea that Cherokee lived on Nacoochee Mound. In 2004, and you can correct me on this, 2004 exploration at the mound by the University of Georgia indicated that probably there was not a Cherokee existence on the mound itself, even though there were settlements, Cherokee settlements, post-contact around the Nacoochee Valley. There are two other mounds. The Kennemer Mound is also in Nacoochee Valley. A lot of the locals think that's just a big mound out there. It's not been really excavated much. And then the third mound escapes me. Do you remember the name of the third mound in Nacoochee Valley? I can't recall it right away. Down in Stevens County, there is Chaga Mound. In the old Tugelo town, George Chicken was an English agent that visited the Tugelo town in 1715. I think Jerry wrote in this last newsletter about the Unicoi Turnpike that began, the locals in Stevens County know where it began down Mullins Ford, further down on the Tugelo River, and then came upstream past Jarrett Manor, and then up Toccoa Creek as it made its way toward Unicoi Gap. Niquossee Mound in Franklin, North Carolina, again another mound of Mississippian inhabitants, and probably earlier, again an earlier picture of Niquossee at Franklin, North Carolina. Track Rock Gap, that's my shortcut to Gainesville whenever I'm going that way by Richard Russell Highway. That's my preferred way to go. And the Track Rock has gone through some renovations. Some of you remember Track Rock Gap when it had the cages over the rocks and the petroglyphs that are there that were made by the Native Americans. What you may not realize is that as you cross over Track Rock Gap and you're going down the valley, heading toward Richard Russell, you're actually passing the site of a fairly significant pre-contact village that, as the DOT was excavating the roadway there, they uncovered several burial sites that were covered back up, and there was a huge problem with locals and Atlanteans and other folks coming to take Native American artifacts that have been uncovered by the road work. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. Clovis Point distribution in Georgia. Clovis Points are Paleo-Indian. They go back thousands and thousands of years. But I want you to focus on one in particular. Towns County. Clovis Point documentation, Paleo-Indian, Towns County. So we know that there has been inhabitants, or at least folks passing through 10,000 years ago in Towns County. Now here's where it really starts to get dicey. You know, we talked about how corruption can occur in oral tradition. Well, same thing in historical tradition. The DeSoto expedition, as it came through the southeast, way back in the 1930s, was documented to pass through close to here. If some of you can remember on old Highway 64 in Clay County, as you went toward Chunky Gal, there used to be a DeSoto sign that the state of North Carolina had up saying DeSoto passed by here in his expedition, blah, 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 blah. Even in Clarksville, Georgia, as you make the square, there's the DeSoto Rock, where the Daughters of the American Revolution, Tomochichi chapter, placed a sign talking about DeSoto passed near here. Close-up of the DeSoto Rock. However, there's a problem. Decisions on that DeSoto route apparently were influenced by politicians in the 1930s, and subsequent research now says that DeSoto did not even pass through northeast Georgia. He crossed the Savannah River near Augusta, then went up through South Carolina, came back down the Coosa Valley toward Rome and the Etowah Mounds, and never made a trek here. Hey, given another 70 years, he may have been back in northeast Georgia. It just depends on the research. But again, that's just an example of how history can change in the span of 50 or 60 years, even what we think is educated history. And we get to TVA. Everybody loves TVA, depending on what generation you're talking about. When the Chatuge Project began in 1941-42, there wasn't a great amount of money, zero as a matter of fact, for archaeological research as they moved things out of the impoundment basin. They did move historical structures, they did move some graves remained as they do out on the mound at the Birch Cemetery. And Sandra talked about. Between 1941 and 42, though, there's a big rush to get the dam built. Now, if you really get down to the nuts and bolts of history, when the Chatuge Project began in July of 1941, the United States was not in World War II. Everybody wants to jump on the horse and say, yeah, boy, we needed that power because of the United States' involvement in World War II. We weren't there yet. The impoundment for the lake began in February 1942. Did I say construction started in 41? Excuse me. Impoundment began in 42 February. By then, the United States had been there for 2 years, or excuse me, 2 months in World War II after the Japanese attack in December of 41. But somebody knew something somewhere. There was not even power production at the Chatuge facility in 1954. That's when the first generator, or the only generator, went in at the Chatuge facility. But they did use it for water impoundment in order to create power downstream for Alcoa and aluminum production in East Tennessee. Like I said, there was no expenditure made for archaeological research in the impoundment area of Lake Chatuge. Now, locations of Native American villages were known by local legends in that impoundment area. Artifacts were collected at those locations over the years. I'm guilty. So are a lot of you in here. You may or may not want to raise your hand. Formal archaeological research was all but impossible because the water covered those sites that we had known about. Now, this is an aerial view of Lake Chatou. This is Denton Strait, the fairgrounds. I want you to pay attention right here. Some of you may realize the old highway left Hiawassee, crossed the river, came across the ball fields, went across the lake, and over towards Cedar Cliff. Where my grandparents' house was located, the old house that was moved, and then the house that they later occupied and lived in was next to a triangle. And the Hiawassee Road, Young Harris Road, and Hazel Road all met at that triangle. But in this code, right here, I've got a star there. My mother used to get me out of my grandparents' house by saying, go out in the field and look for arrowheads. Bless her heart, I did. Now, obviously, I didn't get out there and get wet, but in the fields that were plowed by my grandfather's house, yeah, I'd go out there and start looking for arrowheads and pottery and whatever else I could find, because Mama did say there had been an Indian village there many years ago. Well, indeed, there had been. And those are pieces of pottery that I found at Cedar Cliff, and based on the way that they look, in all probability, they came from the Mississippian age, if not earlier. Now, I was a little squirt, and I didn't have a clue that they were Mississippian. I just knew, hey, they were pottery, and I found them. Look what I found, Mom. Well, this let me know that they were Mississippian. After I got into grad school, I started to look at them real close. Dr. White looked at them real close, and he thought, yeah, probably pre-contact right there in that area. More of the same that I found. Arrowheads were abundant there as well. Now, all of these arrowheads, they start from early Paleo-Indian to Archaic, and then I do not show anything from Mississippian because in the Mississippian age, or the Mississippian stage, a lot of that design carried over. Well, those are the arrowheads that I found at the same spot. Probably late Archaic, probably woodland. Regardless, they were influenced by that age, and they came from Mississippian. Again, right there in an area covered by Lake Chatou. Now, anybody affiliated with TVA that's getting ready to call on your cell phone to an enforcement officer, I think, yeah, you probably can pick up arrowheads if it's your land. And at the time, it belonged to my granddaddy. Okay, thank you. So it was. I wasn't on TVA land. I won't be going to jail after this is over. Now here was the problem, and it's the problem that all of us have committed, the sin that we've all committed. When we salvaged those things, we took them out of context. Because when you're doing archaeological survey, the fact that you're doing archaeological research, you're doing damage. To do archaeology, you dig. Well, you've done damage right away. You try to tread lightly so that you do find artifacts in context around things that can help date those artifacts. But most of us, we just look down, oh, that looks like an arrowhead, and we pick it up. Lucky for us, it was surface recoveries. I know I didn't go out with a shovel and a pail and start digging. That's when it really starts to get problematic as far as taking things out of context. This is a stone bowl, probably archaic. It was found at the junction of Hiawassee River and Potter Creek. Now, out of respect for the individual who said that I could use this picture, I won't say any more as to where, who, or anything else, but this was carved out of stone, found here in Towns County, and it's probably archaic in nature. It goes back that far, 8,000 years, anywhere from 8,000 to 6,000 years old. Now, events occur that do lead to archaeological investigations, and those subsequent finds increase our knowledge of Native Americans. Battery died? Nope. Recently in Stevens County, there were folks riding around in the woods in the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest. They were digging up the ground, and lo and behold, it led to a discovery. It led to a discovery in Stevens County that some of the artifacts there actually had gone back 200 years earlier than what had originally been thought, because those artifacts had been found in context. So get the picture now. Archaeologists had said that what they had found up to this point only went back so far. And now they found new material that went back even further. And this was reported by Alison Shields from WDUN when she did an interview with the archaeologists from the University of Georgia involved in that dig. This is some of what was found at the site in Stevens County. Now, whether by intent or accident, archaeological research can lead to a lot. Another example of accidental research, Brasstown Valley Resort. When Brasstown Valley was constructed in the early 1990s, as they started to move some dirt around, they discovered an expansive Native American presence. Brasstown Valley has sites that have been recorded, 9TO, 44, 45, 48 in Brasstown Valley. There were 314 excavations beyond the Brasstown Valley Resort. 11,676 events came from that excavation at the resort in and of itself. It came from archaic, woodland, Mississippian, historic Cherokee, that's post-contact with the whites. They found evidence of houses, palisades, probably from the Mississippian era. It found evidence that things probably haven't changed as far as the woodland is concerned, except maybe for chestnuts. They have passed by the wayside. And they also found out there at the Brasstown Valley site that cultivation was dominant, and in the late periods, corn. Like, you've never seen corn growing in Brasstown Valley? Yeah, I mean, all the time. Now, this map here shows woodland and Mississippian sites. For those of you sitting in the back, sorry, but this is Brasstown Creek. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sites listed, and those are just listed out of this particular document. Many more. You move over to the Notley River, you don't see quite as many, but come back over to the Hiwassee River. There's TO1, 11, one here, one there. I can't read it because it's so blurred. Probably couldn't read it if it wasn't blurred. I left my glasses in the truck. But I focus here to where you get it a little tighter there to see. These are documented sites along the creeks. Brasstown Creek and the Hiwassee River. Now let's play a little what if. Let's go back to all the mounds. Peachtree Mound, it's on the Hiwassee River. Spikebuck Mound on the Hiwassee River. The Coochie Mound's on the Chattahoochee. The Chaga Mound's on the Tugelo. The Niquossee Mound on the Little Tennessee River. They all are located pretty close to the rivers. Conjecture. What if instead of building mounds, what if some cultures opted to use naturally existing positions? If you study the research on the Mississippian Indians, most of the mounds that were built for the cultural leaders and religious leaders. That's where they got to live, and that's where council houses were built by the Cherokee. But before contact, we speculate that some of those mounds had religious connotation. There are 2 mounds in Brasstown Valley. Both are located on a direct line of sight with Track Rock Gap. Track Rock Gap is almost compass due south of these 2 mounds. They're also due south of 2 existing mounds in Brasstown Valley, site 9TO25 and site 9TO294. And I'll say more about where they're located. But they're on both sides of Highway 66 or Murphy Street, and both of these mounds overlook the alluvial plain of Brasstown Creek. And 294 is right there. 25 is down here in the valley of Brasstown Creek. And that little notch right there is Track Rock Gap. So if you draw a line right across there, you get to this mound here. And it's almost in a due north-south line. That could be significant, may not be significant. The mound closest proximity to the site, 9TO294, is unnamed and is just west of Timberline Drive. And it's been there for as long as I can remember. Now, if you come into Young Harris on 76, the mound is on your right, just as soon as you pass the new apartments. The mound on your left is courtesy of the Blue Ridge Mountain Electric Corporation. Now, it was a highway cut. 76 did go through a little cut there in a little undulation, but when they built the new Blue Ridge Mountain Electric site, they kept piling the dirt up there. Thankfully they did, because I can't see the lights at night whenever the sun goes down. The other mound is directly across from the Blue Ridge Mountain Electric. It's home of Mount Zion Church. Anybody a member of the North Mount Zion Church in here? Anybody? I was worried about that because I'm about to scare you. That site is called Strike Hill. Anybody living in Brasstown Valley knowing about Strike Hill? My daddy told me the story, my granddaddy told me the story, my aunts told me the story. The reason it's called Strike Hill is anytime there's a storm that passes through the valley, lightning's going to strike there. Now, I'm not stupid enough during the thunderstorm to stand out there and watch and look, but I'm glad Strike Hill is there. Now, it was often told to me that the reason Strike Hill got hit was because something buried in the ground, could be iron ore deposits, who knows? Don't have a clue. But you might not be able to tell it by the picture, but they're excavating for the new church on top of that hill right now. I will tell you point blank to your face. If you say I said otherwise, I'll call you a liar to your face. I want to go there so bad I can't stand it. I want to walk through that dirt. I want to pick it up. I think, what the heck? They've already turned it for me. What's the heck? You know, what's the worst that can happen? They can arrest me. I'll run to Union County. They'll get me out of jail maybe. I don't know. But Strike Hill just kind of makes me wonder. Keep in mind, we're playing what if. Both of these mounds overlook that broad alluvial plain that's around Brasstown Creek. You and I both know, well, some of us know that live there, that there have been arrowheads picked up by the dozens, even away from the Brasstown Valley site. Now, let's do a little more what if. If you look at how the rivers flow, if you look at Brasstown Creek flowing into the Hiwassee River, and how the Hiwassee River flows into East Tennessee to make connection, and I'm talking pre-TVA here, to make connection with the Little Tennessee River. It's a lot easier, even if you look at the topography, to go down the Hiwassee River than it is to try to navigate up the Ocoee River through Ocoee Gorge to get to where the Notley joins it and moves into Union County. I'm just speculating, but that could be the reason why we don't have that many archaeological sites documented along the Notley River like we do along Brasstown Creek and the Hiwassee River. Because keep in mind, what was the highway system for the Native Americans? The rivers. And then when you butt up against the Blue Ridge, even though the Tennessee drains into the Gulf just like the Chattahoochee, why would Native Americans want to cross gaps when they had natural pathways? Again, we're just playing what if. Not saying they did, not saying they didn't. There's adequate circumstantial evidence to suggest that there's been a Native American presence in Brasstown Valley. Everybody kind of agree? Have I not presented enough evidence to say, yeah, maybe so? There's been documented petroglyphs, track rock, and I'll show the documentation here in a second. There's petroglyphs, you know, the symbols on the rocks carved in at site 9TO25, which we looked for and didn't find, but it's there in Brasstown Valley. There have been 10,000 plus events recorded at the Brasstown Valley project. Artifacts have been collected by local residents. So there's more than enough evidence to say there was a significant presence in Brasstown Valley. The research in Brasstown Valley has not been adequate. I'm telling you now, based on everything that we've discovered, it's not been adequate. Here's an aerial view of Highway 66, the Murphy Road. These are the tennis courts at the college. Here goes 66. This is our treatment pond, and it doesn't smell bad, much to the credit of the folks in Young Harris. This site right here is one site, this site is another, that have been documented in the valley. First, 9TO294. This is a broad archaeological site that almost matches this roadway to Young Harris Village. It was a development that never was. But the roads were put in, underground utilities are there, This is a documented Native American site. The next one is on the other side of 66, out in the Bryson Field. There's a little mound right there. This is 9T025. And it's also a documented archaeological site. It's right off Highway 66 here in Towns County. Now, we're confronted with events that lead to potential archaeological investigations in Brasstown Valley or permanent destruction of further evidence pertaining to Native Americans. This is where I'm going to get a little political. You can throw me out if you want to. The state of Georgia's got it in their mind to expand 515, 76, whatever you want to name it, to pick up the 4 lanes that come out of Blairsville into Brasstown Valley, to meet the 4 lanes that come down off the mountain there at Swanson Mountain into Brasstown Valley. There is a proposed bypass around Young Harris. What is there to bypass in Young Harris? Bear with me. There's an aerial view. There were 3 ideas proposed by the Department of Transportation. The first one used the existing corridor that goes through Young Harris and expand it. Well, there were too many historic buildings that would be destroyed, so that was a wash. The next one was the bypass would start at the old EMC site, go down Sampson Street, and move into Highway 66 and cross over. That was washed out because too many historic sites would be disturbed. Now the one in red that leaves the old Blue Ridge Mountain Electric site goes down and crosses an archaeological site, number 25, 66. There's the pond, the stinking pond, but it doesn't really stink. It goes across another historic site, archaeological site, and then will eventually come out at Timberline Road. The proposed Young Harris bypass will feature 2 roundabouts, not traffic signals. And there's the first roundabout at the old Blue Ridge Mountain Electric site. 2 lanes come in, 2 lanes leave on the bypass, 2 lanes continue through town with a center turn lane. It's hard enough for people to use their turn signal to turn right or left. Folks are going to use this without accidents? Yeah, boy. And then at Timberline Drive, there's another roundabout that's going to go in place. This is the view at Timberline Drive. The road will come in from the left here, pretty much where that intersection is, and that will be the roundabout that joins 76. This is Corn Creek as it moves to join Brasstown Creek. This is the view of where the roundabout will come in from the shores of Corn Creek. The roundabout will come in from the left, Timberline Drive here. And that's the mound that was constructed by Blue Ridge Mountain Electric. This is Corn Creek. This is where Timberline Drive is. And I'm standing pretty much on the area that was staked by the DOT in their original survey. And this is what you'll see as you drive toward the roundabout at Timberline Drive. Now, this is a map that shows site 294, and I'm not going to keep saying 9TO, and site 25. The bypass comes and hits 66, crosses over, and almost cuts a third of this designated archaeological site. Now here's my thinking. You've got 2 roundabouts. The way it is now, you've got a red light in Young Harris. We've got a dedicated left turn signal that I've never seen work. It'll turn red, it'll flash yellow, but I've never seen it turn green, and I've sat on Professor Adams' wall waiting for that thing to turn green. You can tell I've got a great social life, can't you? It's never turned green, but we've got one. And, you know, as far as accidents and all that, you know, the kids that go to college, they punch that little walk symbol, the lights flash, they walk across. Never seen accidents, don't stand out there the whole time. But now they're going to create yet another intersection on 66. And what's this going to be? Is it going to be a stop? Which way? Is it going to be a 4-way, 2-way, or hold on, here we go? You know, another intersection there on 66. But my point is, it's cutting across designated archaeological sites. This is the site where the bypass will cross 66. The archaeological site is just to the left. This is Brasstown Creek, and that's the broad plain that probably Native Americans, and I know arrowheads have been found by there, not by me, but arrowheads have been found down there. This is the view of Double Knobs standing at site 294, a designated archaeological site. This road is part of the development that never was, but walked over there and it's just a tremendously beautiful site, and it's not hard to imagine that Native Americans would have existed there, and if those trees weren't there, you'd see Track Rock Gap due south of that site. And if I turned due north, I would be looking at those two unnamed mounds. Now, this is the mound at site number 25 where the road's going to go. The road will actually cross up here. This is the mound, and somewhere back here is the petroglyphs on the rock that we've never found yet, but the state has documented it. This is Brasstown Creek to the right, and the mound is just at the center of the picture. Again, site 25 with the mound, Brasstown Creek. Golly, that mouse is going. How easy or how much of a challenge will it be to protect this area? Well, it depends. Got a story for you. This is Highway 76. This is my house, 668 Miller Street. It's in yellow. Why? Because it qualifies as a historic site to be placed on the National Register. Here's how it happened. I was at the house, putting down tile in the kitchen. Now, if you've ever worked with thin set, you don't mix a whole lot of it at one time. And you get it down in a hurry so you can set your tile. So I just laid the first set down. I was out on the porch, getting ready to stir up another, and I looked at the corner of the yard on Miller Street, and there was a guy with glasses taking pictures of me in the house. Okay, so I took my pointy little trowel and walked out. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I asked him, "Could I help you?" He said, "Yes, I'm from the government." I swear, if he had said, "I'm here to help," I was going to throw something at him. But he said, "I'm from the government. I'm with the State Department of Transportation, and I'm taking a survey of dwellings here in Young Harris in preparation for the bypass. What can you tell me about the houses on this street?" Okay, so I told him the story. I said, "My granddaddy built the house. I've got pictures. The footprint has not appreciably changed since the house was built in the mid-1940s. I live there now." He said, "Well, if you can send some pictures to me at this address, we'll get you qualified for National Register." Okay, here we go. So I sent it in. What does it mean? Nothing. I mean, can I still make changes to the property? Yep. Will I go to jail? Nope. What it does mean, though, is if you own public land and receive federal money and it qualifies for National Registry, now there is a criteria set that they have to follow, jump through hoops. I don't have to do that. But here in Young Harris, hey, I'm historic district. Over on Dean Street, right next to the archaeological site, that's a historic district as well. It qualifies. Now notice here, it's not yellow yet. In other maps, it will turn yellow. That's Zell Miller's place. So it does turn yellow as a historic site. But no, it's not quite there yet. Now, as far as protecting archaeological sites, here are the two killers. If it's a power survey project, 85% of the time, archaeological sites are lost. If it's a highway project, hey, it gets better. Only 84.6% of the time, archaeological sites get lost. Guess which one we're talking about? Right there. Now, Monday a week ago, I think it was, could have been 2 weeks ago now, the State Department of Transportation started throwing these signs up at Young Harris. Also noticed them over at Blairsville. What those signs say is this: there is a public detour open house, the 14th, 4 to 7, Harrelson Memorial Civic Center in Blairsville, Georgia. Now, I'm not saying go, not go, but it just kind of makes you wonder, why not? Now, this is what the state put out. This is the latest edict from the state of Georgia, Department of Transportation. Sites 25 and 294 are both pre-contact period soapstone quarries. State of Georgia admits it. They are petroglyphic sites. They are recommended eligible for protection under the National Registry of Historic Places and inclusion by the Southeastern Archaeological Services after Phase 2 archaeological testing. Phase 1 archaeological testing means they've got some guy from the state of Georgia with a shovel that goes out, digs a test hole, finds something, boy, it looks good, then that's Phase 1. Phase 2 gets a little more complicated, but it's not real complicated. Construction designs would have no impact on Site 925 as it's outside construction limits and will be avoided. Not according to the map. I don't think they have moved the right-of-way since that map was published. But again, that's the state of Georgia. Changes have occurred to Site 924. That's on the other side of 66. And given the site's eligibility, proposed implementation of construction in this area will be addressed in the forthcoming assessment of effects, meaning they may move it, but we're going to move it to. From a designated site to a site that even has more potential for artifacts. And the guy that wrote this, that's his name, Philip W. Quirk, Principal Investigator, Edwards Pittman Environmental Incorporated. Now, what we stand to lose is this. What made us? You know, I don't care if some of you say, yeah, I've got Native American blood, some of you don't. You don't have to be a politician to claim that you're a Native American. You can claim it, not be one. Your connection with the past. If you damage and lose archaeological sites, you lose that connection with the past. Obviously, you use history. You just lose it forever. You lose your heritage. The record of climate and environmental change. That context that I talked about, as they move through the stratum, they can determine what events have or haven't occurred to that site. Hundreds of years of humans in Brasstown Valley. You've lost the evidence once it's destroyed. Discovery of new things. We have no idea what's underground. We lose all these things forever if something's not done. And they are irreplaceable. You don't get them back. You don't get second chances. These people have to contribute to my presentation. I appreciate it very much. Like I said, if you like it, thank you. If not, Jerry Taylor's the man to blame.
What he didn't tell you was how this kind of got started, this whole idea. It was, someone told me about a mound in Bryson's pasture. So nothing would do but that he and I and Sissy, some of y'all know who Sissy is, that's my dog, climbed over a fence and went to that mound to look at it, and that was the impetus for this whole thing. I can't believe how much work he has done on that in the last month or so. It's very profound. And saying that, of course, Historical Society is non-political. There's a disclaimer. So, but it is interesting and worthwhile to know that there is a meeting tomorrow in Blairsville, and he can tell you again when and where it is if anybody's interested.